Okay, we're now live on YouTube. Over to today's chair, Councillor Danielle Stone.
Lovely, thank you very much and welcome everybody. I don't think we've got a very long agenda, so we'll try and do this one very smartly because I know everybody's got other pressures. If we could have the agenda. No, has anybody got anything to declare? No? Has everybody read the minutes of the last coordinating group?
Yeah.
Yep, can we confirm them as accurate?
Agreed.
Lovely, thank you very much. So my understanding of this meeting is that we're looking at the work programme. I don't think there's any urgent business, is there? Before we look at the work programme, can I just say that one of the things that I'm a bit bothered about at the minute is the development of the housing strategy. I think all the scrutiny groups have got a huge vested interest in seeing that process as it develops, and also having some input, I would hope. I'm not sure where we are with the development of the housing strategy, and I know that my scrutiny group hasn't been consulted on it at all. I think a very basic outline for the strategy has gone to people. I don't know if it's gone to place, but this is such an important, we're in the middle of a housing crisis, aren't we? It's such an important area of work. I'm just, and it's so complicated, isn't it? I just think we need to really think hard about how we can address that one. So if I just leave you to think about that for a minute. So we're on agenda item 6 and we're considering cross-theme issues. So if we could go down a bit to see what they are. Okay.
They are detailed on your agenda mainly, Councillor Stone, for corporate. You've got the highways contract, major contracts and capital contracts and housing. They are the suggested ones on your work programme. Okay,
we've all got a vested interest, we've all got a real interest, haven't we, in the new highways contract?
Yeah.
Now I know an awful lot of that will be commercially sensitive information, but I'm quite interested in the process by which that contract is put together and what the arrangements are for tendering and for making the assessment of who the contract goes to, and above all else, given the history of what's gone on, how the contracts are going to be monitored and reviewed. So I don't know what other people think about that. If we could have some views from around the virtual table.
Chair, I think one of the things in this that we had clarified at one of our meetings was the fact that the highways contract, the tender's already been written. So what we're looking at is the responses to the tender. So basically all the parameters are set for it. It's just the way that they're being interpreted by the various bidders. So we can't really redesign what was set together in the tender, but what we need to look at is the way that it's taken forward by the people who are tendering for it, if that makes sense. Is that how, Tracy, you were present, is that how you understood it?
Yes, Councillor Banbridge, that's right.
I think I was aware that the tendering process has already begun. I am interested in how the tenders are put together. I know we can't do anything about it, but I've had the experience of being at the county where the tendering process was absolutely fine, but the specifications in the requirements for the tender weren't right, and so the outcomes are, and that was the children's centres, and so the outcomes weren't right. And one of the things that I'm really interested in is who is making the decision, or how is the decision being made about what has absolutely got to go out to contracts and what could be kept in-house? Because I'm quite keen in this day and age of keeping things local, and I know we all are, and building our own capacity so that we can develop the local economy and bring in good jobs and stuff like that. And I haven't seen any consideration anywhere about that discussion, you know. So is everything going out? Is everything in the tender?
Chair, I spoke to Stuart Timmis about this and made the point very strongly that in future, the overview and scrutiny groups should look at these in the process when the tenders are actually being written. And that is where exactly what you say, it can be influenced, because as far as I understand it, all those things are already in the tender one way or the other, what is to be carried out by the successful bidder. And we're too late on that. It's sort of the way that they, as I say, I think we're looking at the way they're interpreting it and what their terms would be, etc. Not necessarily financial, but there's a lot of performance information we need to look at.
Yes, there is. I agree with that. Thank you for that. Do you know, Dermot, what the kind of ballpark figure is for that contract?
No, I don't.
So Tracy, give us some advice, because I think what Dermot has just said is really important, and we need to capture that, and it needs to go in front of Cabinet, because I think that's right. When we have major contracts, I think our view is that we would like them to come to scrutiny before they're determined.
Yep, you have got that as the next suggestion, your major contracts and capital contracts.
Okay. Okay.
That is on there.
Lovely. I'm just suggesting that you capture that as a
it's been
recommendation from us.
I'm sure that's
to go
been
to
captured.
Cabinet. Okay.
Yeah, that's been
captured in the minutes as well, Chair.
Lovely, thank you. Okay. So who can give us some advice about how we can approach a collaborative scrutiny looking at the highways contract, not from the point of view of determining anything to do with the tender, but looking at how the process has been and how the monitoring and review is going to take place? Because I mean, one of the things, Dermot and Rosie, that I'm really interested in, and I know you are, is it an outcomes-based contract? You know, is the contract going to get paid depending on the outcome, or are we just going to be paying regardless of the quality of the work?
I think before we can do anything on this, we need a presentation on the highways contract, and that presentation should include at least a copy for us to read. Although I would imagine the tender document goes to hundreds. Well, it will go to hundreds of pages and have a lot of spin-offs under legal and technical things. But we need a good presentation on it. And basically, I would suggest that we need to divide it possibly up into bite-sized chunks so that we can separate out the ones that would affect the different overview and scrutiny committees and look at those separately rather than try and discuss them all together. But I don't know if that'll work or not being familiar with the tender documents. I mean, I've written tender documents in the transport industry, so I've got an idea of the structure and everything, but it's the finer points and exactly what the various items are, because there's so many ways you can slice it up.
That's good for us, though, for you, that you're there with that kind of expertise. I mean, I'm quite interested in having a joint, well, even if it's only at the stage of the presentation, because I'd quite like to have, somebody tell me what the people's view would be and what the place view would be. I know my committee is going to be really interested in the finances, obviously, but finances don't work on their own, do they?
No.
So shall we begin by asking for some kind of executive summary of where we are with the highways contract and what the expectations around it are.
That sounds a good starting point to me.
Yep.
Chair.
Is that okay, Tracy?
Yeah, I've made a note of that. And
Rosie, you're
I'll calculate
speaking,
that.
but you're on mute.
Sorry, good. I was just going to say that I'm not sure how pertinent it is to people, but it is pertinent to actually all councillors. And I don't know what the timetable is for. It seems like, as you say, the specification's been written, so certain decisions have already been made, but it will be going out for decision. But it's something actually that all councillors want to know about.
That's true, but I'm just wondering if there's confidential things that the officers can share with us. They would only do that to a small group, won't they?
The whole thing's confidential, I think you'll find.
Yeah.
Certainly as far as who the responses to it are, because until it's all signed off, and even then some of it may be confidential. But
I think from our scrutiny responsibilities, it would be really important for us to understand the scope and the nature of the contract and the cost. And also, you know, I went for a walk this afternoon and I nearly fell over 3 times, and I had flat shoes on and I was striding out and I was being terribly sensible, and it was you know, an uneven pavement. And, you know, we've had years and years of neglect of pavements, haven't we? So I'm quite interested in this day and age when we're trying to stop people falling over.
Okay, that does come in under people. You're quite right.
There'll be lots of things under people, Rosie. You know, when I first became a councillor, one of the issues I had to deal with was a cul-de-sac with huge great potholes in, and I was called in because a woman had just been brought home from hospital on a stretcher. The wheel of the stretcher got caught in the pothole and she was sent flying.
Oh golly.
Do you know what I mean? These things really do have an impact on people, don't they?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
Okay, let's begin there then, because this is going to be a huge contract. We can't possibly have a look at all of it, but if we begin with an overview, and maybe if we who shall we ask for the overview? All the scrutiny groups, or the chairs and vice chairs, or whoever wants to come from scrutiny?
I would suggest it was everybody, to be quite honest. It's going to be such a major thing, and I think there'll be so many different viewpoints on it, and so many discussions within it. Things like key performance indicators are sort of vital, and then
absolutely
with the bids, there's bound to be some of the bidders who've got different interpretations and perhaps have got even better suggestions for some of the things in the proposal. So, you know, it's a question of thinking outside the square, I think, to some extent, to get the best result.
Can I suggest that you chair that meeting, Dermot, because you're the one with the prior expertise and knowledge?
Well, not on highways contracts, but on sort of major contracts to some extent. Yeah, I'd be happy to do that unless anyone else has got really in-depth knowledge.
I think that might be helpful if you agree to do that. If we just say then, for democratic services' sake, what we would expect out of that meeting. So we want an overview of the contract. We want to know what the key performance indicators are. We want to know what arrangements are in place for contract management and monitoring of the contract and inspection of the work, because none of us are very pleased with the inspections that have been going on, are we?
Daniel, I think we need to go back a step with this, because we need to first know when the tenders are being received. Do any of the officers know when the closing date for this is?
No, sorry, Chair.
Okay, that's the first thing we need to know. And then we need to know the time scale, because once those tenders come in, They've got to be sifted through and a decision made on which one is the best one to look at and to take forward. So
Yeah.
our timescale was very much day one is when the contracts come, the responses to the tenders come in, and then the process by which it's being judged. And we need to look at it very early in that stage, and we probably need to look at it through the stage. We also need to find out how much time there is between the receipt of the tenders and the decisions being made.
Okay.
And then we can work a timescale out on that.
So what I'm hearing you say, Dermot, is we're going to need, progress meetings, aren't we?
I think so, yes. I mean,
Okay.
if the tenders aren't due in for a little while, certainly gives us an opportunity to look at what's gone out in the form of the tender document.
Okay.
But it will be desperately complicated and deep, so there's an awful lot of work there. And I'm not sure at that stage whether we'll be able to sort of separate the corporate people and place sides out of it. But I think as we go into it, that'll come out of it. But that's where we need to start from, in my suggestion. Anyway.
If we start together and we develop an overview together, if it becomes obvious at some stage that we need to look at different things in our different scrutiny groups, we can do that, can't we?
Absolutely.
But I think if we begin together, and then if we're clear about, because obviously we're not trying to micromanage what the officers are doing in any shape or form. We need to be well informed, don't we? And in the end, we need to be satisfied as scrutiny groups that everything has been done in the very best way it possibly can be, even if we may not agree with everything being put into the tender. Do you know what I mean? Because I would have preferred to have had a discussion before the tender process about what needs to be brought back in-house, but never mind, that one's gone. But
I think you'll find the tender was being written a long time before we
possibly
stood in front of the ballot boxes, so it's quite a long process.
Yeah, okay. But if we begin somewhere, because this is our biggest contract, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's our shop front to some extent.
Yeah. So Tracy, Richard, have you got enough there to begin with?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. Okay, so major contracts and capital contracts. Okay, so including the Children's Trust. So what other major contracts have we got that we think that we might need to have a look at?
Waste disposal, but I don't think I don't know, that's sort of not urgent. So, but it's one we're going to have to look at some time.
Well, it might not be urgent in your neck of the woods, Dermot, but it's pretty urgent in mine because we are drowning, and I'm not being dramatic, in fly tipping and litter, and it's horrible. And we've got a contract in Northampton which is costing £2 million a year plus 5% this year. It's gone up by. That 5% is not being passed on to the staff, so the staff are very unhappy. And it's, it's a 10-year contract, but there are issues with it. There are issues with it.
Yeah, no, sorry, I meant the renewal of the contracts rather than the running of the contracts, because I think James has got something to add there. He's waving.
Yeah, sorry, Chair, I don't seem to have a blue hand of any description to raise. Councillor Bambridge has made the point that I was going to make. Are you talking here about scrutiny looking at reletting contracts or the performance of existing contracts, or both?
I'm interested in the performance of existing contracts. I've made it clear on my committee that I would like, so our authority belongs to ABSI, which is the, help me Tracy, the Association of Public
Service Excellence.
And I know that one of the services they offer is a deep dive into existing contracts, and what they're looking for is outcomes and value for money. And I think we've got a lot to learn by doing that exercise.
Danielle, as you know, with the People Scrutiny Committee, one of the things we were very concerned about was how many contracts we've got out for all sorts of services, and of course combining them and bringing four different authorities together. We wanted to make sure that we're getting, like you say, value for money, and it's equitable across the patch. And when I raised it with Martin Henry, and we said that actually we need to go through really sort of some of them line by line, and he said that he would make an officer available for us to do that. But I think it's going to be something we'll have to do a task and finish group on, because it'll be quite a lot of detailed work.
So looking at the 3 contracts we've got at the minute, Daventry, South Northampton, Northamptons.
That's right. It's all the little contracts that are out there for all sorts of different services, let alone obviously adult social care and nursing homes and etc. etc. So there's a lot of different...
there are. Sorry, James, I'll bring you in a minute. Sorry, Rosie, I thought you were talking about the waste contracts, but you're talking about...
Oh no, sorry,
contracts.
I was just telling you how what we had had concerns over, want to look in detail, and Martin Henry has said whatever we need, he will find us an officer to assist us.
Oh right. No, I think the number of contracts in adult social care is scary. 76 for domiciliary care, over 200 for adults with learning difficulties, and I don't know how many for care homes and nursing homes and so on. And you're right, it's a mess. It's because nobody can keep a grip on that number of contracts.
No, and some of we need to look at when things are coming up for renewal, and whether we should be combining or whether some of the smaller ones are working okay anyway. And this is all at the same time of the integrated care system coming into play 1st of April, and us starting to operate a place-based service. That
would be a really interesting, won't it?
Complicated.
But I know in one of the areas where I'm doing a lot of work, not as a councillor but as a voluntary sector person, refugee youth, a lot of their housing is being provided by very small providers, and there's the most enormous number of them, and it's a really expensive way to provide a service. And some of those providers are making millions and millions of pounds out of our young vulnerable people. And sometimes the service is brilliant. Actually, I know a couple of providers where the service is absolutely brilliant, but I know a lot where it isn't. It's really perfunctory and it's not really a service at all. And I just think we've been far too market-led, frankly, and I think we need to get a much better grip on things like that, because the service isn't good and the value for money isn't good.
And it's an opportunity when you've got, as I say, 4 different authorities all coming together. It's an opportunity. There might be economies of scale, or it might be necessary to keep things local. There's a balance.
Yeah. James, you wanted to come in?
No, thank you, Chair. It's been covered.
Oh, right. Okay. So if we go back to the waste contracts, do people think there's any mileage in having a joint task group looking at waste contracts with a view to seeing whether they're delivering the expected outcomes and value for money?
The South Northants doesn't have a contract, it's run in-house.
Oh,
so
brilliant.
That one needs to be looked at separately. I mean, I would think in the first place, perhaps we need to highlight the issues with the waste service in the performance point of view, but equally we need to look further ahead. And one of the issues that we're going to be faced at some stage or another is the waste disposal, which the county council has done up until now, and obviously falls under us. So it's not just collection as we were as borough and district people, but now we do the lot. And the question of how the disposal would be made and the policy regarding it, because there's an awful lot of discussion there, whether we carry on with landfill, whether it's incineration, etc., etc. And of course, within the contracts are other contracts, and I'm thinking here of the companies that take our recycling from us and the contracts we have with them, which are quite complicated to say the least, because the market for a lot of the items that get recycled are very volatile. And for example, paper used to be a high value item because the Chinese were taking our paper back to China to ballast their ships that were bringing all the goods over to this country. But now they don't need it any longer, and suddenly the price of paper went through the floor. So it's these sort of things that are constantly changing. It's like the stock exchange, the price of these things. So I would suggest we need to first of all highlight where the issues are and then decide where to go from there, to be quite honest, because the waste systems are different between between Northampton, Daventry and South Northants as well.
But that might be interesting, Dan, mightn't it? Because the fact that they are different might give us different perspectives and different examples from which we can gather what's best practice, you know, what's working best.
That's true, but I don't think we go, at the moment, the contracts have got most of them at least 4 years to run, I think. So any changes would not be for that period of time. So I would think it's not on our hot list, if you like, to do.
I'm not sure about that, because I think when we do get the opportunity to refresh and renew contracts, we need to do a lot of learning from the previous ones about what's been going well and what hasn't.
Yeah, Daventry went to this 3-week cycle.
And nobody's happy with that, are they?
I don't know. I don't think it's. I think it's a mixed thing, but it's not just a question of being happy. It's a question of what's more effective and cost effective. So we have to look at it from both sides, don't we?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we do. And you know, we want to look at it as well from a service point of view, don't we? You know, is this the best that we can do for the money that we've got? And is it value for money, and are we getting the outcomes? And
the other thing on this one, of course, it really is our shop front. It's the service that every single person in the district uses to one extent or another, whether they live in a one bed flatlet in the centre of Northampton, or have got a 10-bedroom mansion out in the countryside. It's one, everyone's affected by it, and it's the one that people get served by every week. So we have to get that right, as well as the cost.
Could I ask then, or could I suggest then, that we ask the officers to do a briefing for us on the 3 systems that we've got going now, and how well the contracts are performing and what the indicators are. I know I've had it must have been a 2-hour meeting with our contract manager for Veolia in Northampton, and because I've been so on the case about it, because my area is awash, as I say, with absolute mountains of fly tipping, he took me through line by line by line of his monitoring sheets and showed me exactly how it was monitored and what the clawback was when the service was wrong. And it was brilliant, and I was really pleased to have received that. It didn't change the fact, I mean, the processes seemed good to me, but it didn't change the fact that it's not working for the people of Northampton, you know. So still further questions to be asked about that. But you know, if we take the highways contract we've been talking about before as an example of how long the lead-in time is for new contracts, I think it probably is the right thing to do to try and reach an understanding of how well these contracts are performing, or the services are performing in South Northampton's case. I'm very interested to know that.
Yeah, I mean, our service in South Northampton's changed because we were doing it together with, to a great extent, with Charwell. But I mean, from putting my hat on as place ONS at the moment, we've got a lot of priorities, and I would say that's something we definitely need to look at, but I wouldn't put it in my top 10 at this stage, to be quite honest.
Okay, so fair enough. So if we revisit that one, what, say in 12 months' time?
Probably the end of the year, I would suggest.
Yeah?
I don't
Okay.
know what the officers think on that.
It's entirely up to yourselves making the suggestion, but probably the end of the year, beginning of next year would probably be more timely, because I know your work programs at the moment are very, very heavy.
That's the problem, yeah. I mean, Fiona Unit is the officer that's most au fait with all of this, because she's been doing it for years and years, and she's a real expert in all areas of it. So she's the one that we probably need to talk to at some stage to get some distance on it, along obviously with Phil Larratt, who's the portfolio holder.
Okay, so if we revisit that in November, December, yeah?
Yeah, I think we would need to perhaps have a meeting and call the two of them in.
Okay.
To some extent.
Brilliant. Okay, thanks for that, Dermot. So if we consider now the Children's Trust, because that's going to be, you know, I've got a lot of anxieties about this, you know. I think they're doing a really good job, better than I was expecting them to in some regards. I think they've got a good grip on what needs to happen in terms of staffing. I tell you the thing I'm not happy about, and I don't think anybody can be happy about, is where the boundaries are between education, the Children's Trust, and adult services and the Children's Trust. Those boundaries are not very clear at all. You must find that a bit perplexing, Rosie.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously we are keeping an eye on the fact that we had an excellent presentation from the interim head of children's services, but obviously what I don't know is what, and I did ask Matt Dolby when I saw him last week, what the timetable is for actually the replacements of what are very key posts. The head of the education is stepped in as an interim, but he was only interim on education. So we must have two significant posts being advertised at the moment, and in fact, actually, public health's only interim as well. You know,
but they're reorganising that post, aren't they, and putting it under Stuart Lackenby?
Yes, children and adult social care are all going to go under Stuart, aren't they?
So that post is going to become an AD post, isn't it?
So, as I say, I just don't know what's happening about the filling of those posts, what the timetable is, when we're going to have somebody in post, because obviously, you know, we're very anxious to get them in front of us to actually give us an idea of where the service is going. I'm very, I hope it's not overstretching Stuart Lackenby, because he's got such a lot on his plate.
Well, I think that's my worry, I have to say.
But he is very good. I mean, I can understand why they perhaps made that decision, but we certainly don't want to overstretch him, because, you know, as I say, with the integrated care system and the place-based function for delivery of health and social care, you know, that's a huge change, let alone trying to keep all the, you know, the care homes and the domiciliary care and all the rest of it going within these straitened times. Yeah, that is of concern. There's no doubt about it.
One corporate scrutiny was looking at the Children's Trust budget. The suggestion was made there, in fact, I think it was made by Colin Foster in the first place, that it might be useful to take a theme, like, for example, children with special needs, and ask all the services to come and talk to us about that, because they all have a different area of responsibility in that regard.
Yeah, we did have well, certainly the special education, they are commissioning a new school, a new school, and we had a presentation about you know, what this interim guy's take on it was, because obviously it's been costing us a lot of money to find placements outside the well, West Northants district, but also the county, you know, the old county service, and they are re-providing that service in-house, but I don't know when. I think they've got I think it's gone out for tender. They've got a provider. I think they've got land, and I think it's going to take a year to actually come on stream.
And is that going to be in South Northants?
I don't think he told us where it was. I think that was, again, commercially sensitive.
But I think it is, because I think one of the issues for South Northants is that too many of their SEND children are being sent out of the county.
Yes, I mean, I know I'd have to ask Fiona Baker for details on that.
But there are other issues, aren't there? So there's issues about respite care. You know, respite care seems to have completely collapsed, and there are issues about Fiona's got a real bee in her bonnet, and I do understand it, about integration of SEND children within mainstream schools. So that's another pressure on mainstream schools, and they're under a huge amount of pressure already, including you know, staffing and class sizes and space and all of that kind of stuff.
We are getting, I mean, the schools thing is really difficult because, of course, when we was really interesting listening to this guy as to where our responsibilities, you know, start and finish now because of the academy system. And we are asking for the next one meeting, I think, for this regional education. Oh, thank you. Thanks, James. What's he called? The regional
schools commissioner.
Schools commissioner. Because obviously education isn't under us anymore, but we do have certain responsibilities for assuring standards. It's really very complicated how it's how the responsibilities are divided, and what we can and can't do and can and can't look at.
I understand that, and because I used to work in education, so, and I used to, you know, be the one when we were doing international work. I used to give the briefing to our colleagues from other countries about the school education system in Britain.
Oh wow, maybe I need to talk to you.
I'm so glad I don't have to do it anymore, because it's got so extraordinarily complicated. I wouldn't want to do it now. But
one of the things the reason we want to see this guy is that it is we have got responsibilities for standards, and it is clear that some of the schools are not operating, are not improving, not operating to an agreeable standard, or improving fast enough. So some schools have been lumped in with these new academies on the basis that, you know, that was going to improve their Ofsted standing, and it's not, and actually the educational attainment of the children, and it's not actually happening. So that's what we're trying to hold this guy to account.
Right, but what I understand that, and that's will be fascinating, and I might come and sit in on that scrutiny group. But what I was suggesting, Rosie, was that there are areas where corporate scrutiny would have an interest, which is where all the overlaps are between the services. So schools and the Children's Trust and place. So in terms of where school places are needed, where respite care is needed, who's doing the assessment. So from a family's point of view, they don't care, do they, which service is providing what? They just want it all to come together in the best interest of their SEND child. And then there's other issues about where the fit is between children's and adult social care as the children move through the system and get older. It's all those kind of things, you know, where we need to develop a bit more of an integrated understanding, really, of how it's all working. And I'm saying that because I know that even the services don't, you know, until they've worked it all through, it's not always that clear to them either.
Well, certainly under this integrated care system and having this place-based sort of service, there's going to be 9 different place organisations, sort of like mini health and wellbeing boards, if you like. And I was quizzing Stuart to say what needs to be thought about is because obviously the 9 is now just a proposal, as to how those 9 hubs are going to work with the overview and scrutiny system, because obviously you can't, it'd be ridiculous to have 9 separate reports for each place hub. But I don't know how we're going to monitor the you know, best practice and delivery and so on of all those different 9 places. So you know, I posed that question to Stuart Lackenby, and he nodded sagely. But I'm certainly very interested in this, in the capital contracts line, and would be very interested to be involved in that as a joint venture with all of us. And not only what's in the contract now, but what we think we might be looking to be bidding for in the future. What our different directorates are wanting to have as a bid going forward for next time, because there'll be one that's obviously been agreed already, but what's more interesting is what they're actually going to be bidding for in the future, and whether we can add any support and or weight to for the cabinet when they actually come to you know, divvying up the money and deciding what goes through and what doesn't. Sorry, James, am I rambling?
No, and no need to apologise to me, Chair. It's no, you weren't. Yeah, just when it wasn't specifically on your point.
Well, carry on, James. It's fine.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, a more general point, and it's a suggestion that councillors may well shoot down immediately, is if you're looking at potential cross-cutting themes for overview and scrutiny, there might be 2 ways of approaching this. So there may be some cross-cutting themes where the coordinating group can identify from the start that, yeah, that is definitely a topic area that needs to be done jointly, and possibly housing is the most obvious example of those already on the list. There might be other areas where there's the potential to that they become cross-cutting, maybe, and possibly not wholly, but some aspects of them might concern all of the scrutiny committees or different combinations of the 3 scrutiny committees. And so with those, it might be an approach that they could be dealt with individually. They could go on to one of the scrutiny committee's work programs, and provided that the coordinating group is keeping an eye across all of the work programs, then there would be scope there to identify, well, people has got this topic on its work program, or the coordinating group thinks that's starting to get into the cross-cutting area, and therefore there might need to be a further consideration about how that is done moving forward. So, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is that the coordinating group doesn't necessarily need to feel that it has to identify all of the cross-cutting topics from the start and only at the start. It may be able to identify some, the most obvious ones, but there would be other ways of picking up other emerging ones as it went through.
That's very helpful, James, actually. Thank you. And I really take that point. But can I just say, in terms of the Children's Trust, one of the things I'm thinking about, Dermot, is to do with place as well. It's about we need family hubs. So I think there's general agreement that we need family hubs. Andrea Leadsom is in favour of family hubs. The Children's Trust want family hubs. Chris Kiernan and his counterpart in the North recently put in a bid for money for family hubs. They didn't get it. So we need family hubs. So one of the issues there for place is, where would they be? And have we got existing assets that can be used to provide them? And so for me, that linkage with, you know, a really necessary service that comes under people has actually got implications for place, and has certainly got implications for corporate scrutiny, because we need to be actively looking at strategies that bring down the cost of looking after families in crisis. So, you know, we're really interested in prevention work, which is going to have an impact on the budget in terms of, you know, helping families before they fall apart. So it's that kind of thing that I'm wondering, you know, if there's any mileage. But I'm happy to do what James says, which is, you know, to keep a watching brief, and as and when these issues become live, to then have another look at, to see how useful it would be to have a coordinated task and finish group. So shall we leave that one there?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll keep a watching brief, particularly on the Children's Trust, and we'll revisit the waste later in the year. And so the immediate thing is going to be highways. We've already covered that. So if we go to housing then.
Just before we do that, Chair.
Yeah.
One thing that's come to my mind is that obviously we've got a fairly focused view of in each of our committees. And as we go through these things will crop up. And I think it's our duty to then perhaps suggest that we need to call in one of the other, or both of the other overview and scrutiny committees to look into their specific aspects of it. And as you say, buildings. So for example, whether it's Children's Trust schools or whatever, if there's or libraries or whatever, if there's a building or premises or land involved, then that perhaps could then be given to a task and finish group within, for example, place to go away and look into that to help the other overview and scrutiny that perhaps is looking into a contract or something. It's sort of horses for courses. James, does that sort of fit in with your thinking?
Yeah, it would. And I mean, it's often a helpful approach with scrutiny to think about what you're looking to achieve and the best way of going about that, rather than ending up being limited by structure, rather than as opposed to making the structure work for you. And certainly if you're talking about doing things through task and finish groups, then that gives you the scope, for example, as Councillor Bambridge says, to possibly have two complementary task and finish groups looking at different aspects of a broad topic, or possibly as another variation, you could have a task and finish group composed of an equal number of members from 2 different scrutiny committees.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Because the last thing we want to do is with something complicated is for example, if Rosie's got something that has got some place bits in it, and equally we've got some bits in hers, we don't want to have to go through a whole review of the whole contract or whatever it is, just to focus on those areas. So I think that whoever is whichever is the committee that is most appropriate should perhaps pluck out the items in it that should be referred to the others. I think that would be the most effective way and economic way of doing it.
Are we all agreed? Yeah, I think we've lost Councillor Grant, haven't we? Okay, if we go on to housing.
No,
Really,
oh,
you're
I'm
still
here.
there. Hi.
I'm still listening.
You're being very quiet, Andrew.
Well, I was driving, so I've been very good.
Oh, very good. Okay. Okay, housing. So I'm really interested in this one. Shall we again? Can I suggest that we have a session with all the scrutiny groups together and ask for a briefing that'll give us an overview of housing in West Northants? So what we've got and what we need.
Well, we've just had a workshop style briefing from housing, and they are about to go out for consultation. There was some debate as to whether we wanted to see what the consultation was going to say before, but I think we kicked that into touch and let the officers do what they do, and they come back to us when the consultation has finished, for then to pull together the strands so that we can have another more detailed discussion about their proposals going forward and what will go in the report that goes forward to Cabinet and Council.
So what are they consulting on?
It's a very wide-ranging consultation, I think. I haven't seen their proposal yet, but there's certainly going to be a 3-week consultation. And obviously, although we were, privy to getting the information from the officers, and they heard some of our concerns and the things that we were keen and interested in. We obviously, as individuals, as I pointed out, as individual councillors, we can all also feed in our ideas during the consultation period. And in fact, I saw, I've forgotten her name, not Jo, the other lady, and
Jane Carr.
I've forgotten now.
Brooks.
Jackie, that's right, Jacqueline. And because I'd had some thoughts after the meeting about maybe we could be bidding for some sort of protected housing for children who, or for families that are not just subject to abuse, but maybe where social workers want to give extra support, where they are possibly going to be considering taking the children into care, but maybe they could bring them to a more sort of like a group of housing where there's a creche and a school, and where they can be giving that family some extra support rather than having to take the children into care. It was just a thought, but I was feeding those kind of ideas in for the consultation, and then we'll see where it takes us.
So this is a consultation on the housing strategy?
Yes. So
Okay.
I think it's very wide ranging. I think it's very wide
But
ranging.
it doesn't include HIMOs, does it? Because
They certainly got the message that that was an issue that we were, was of great concern to us. And
that HIMO review has been given to planning to look at, and I'm not at all amused by that. I think that's absolutely absurd.
I think, yeah, to an extent, this is an interim housing strategy. So there's a lot of sorting out in this area of West Northants work, as with everything, and bringing together different elements from the predecessor authorities. I think this is described as a housing strategy, but I don't think it will be as wide ranging as a full housing strategy necessarily would be with an established authority. I think there's an element of dealing with the things that need to be dealt with immediately, pending possibly a more wide-ranging piece of work in years to come. Would you say that was fair, Councillor Herring, based on what they said?
Yes, I guess so. I mean, obviously there were things like trying to amalgamate the allocations criteria for all of the different authorities, which they all had different considerations. So that was a piece of work that had to be done. But also, I'm still frustrated, and I think I share Councillor Stone's frustration with planning being involved. It's housing and planning have got to be not amalgamated, but working tighter together, because obviously housing has to be giving planning the information and data to actually be bidding for funds with the developers, and knowing what actually we want in the different developments.
But there's a huge issue in my area, and I'm sure it is across West Northants, with developer-led development. So resulting in the huge destabilisation of communities. So you will have read the press release that came out last week following a 3-day of action in an area of Northampton called Semilong. It's a small area, and in that area, all the officers, multi-agency, fire, police, private sector housing, wardens and so on, went door to door. They immediately closed 3 houses and took all the inhabitants out. They found 2 cannabis farms, and they found 50 illegal HIMOs. Now, from my point of view, this is the result of the destabilisation of our communities, because everything has been a free-for-all for developers, and there hasn't been a tight enough grip on what is going on. And Rosie, you're absolutely right, that the fact that planning happens in a space all on its own, without any regard to housing strategy, without any regard to building control, without any regard to trading standards, for example, that this is what we get. This is in my ward. Between Christmas and the end of February, there were 3 armed police raids on estates, and it's unacceptable. We've got to find ways of managing what we're doing a lot better. James.
Yeah. So what the people workshop on the housing strategy on the 1st of March was told was that so if we call this the interim housing strategy, that's going out to public consultation April, May, and is due to go for a decision to Cabinet in July. But that's part of a wider piece of work that's going to be running till 2024. So it's an element of a wider piece of work around housing more generally, which I think is going to be looking to pick up issues like rough sleeping, HIMOs, homelessness, rather than this all being encompassed in the piece of work that's going that's subject to public consultation and a cabinet decision in the next few months.
Okay, but we have got, you know, some urgent issues facing us. I don't think they're going to wait till 2024. So the cost of temporary accommodation is going through the ceiling. The demand is increasing and the cost is increasing, and it's putting huge pressure on the budget. And you know, things like that need to be looked at, don't we? I know that there's a huge scam going on at the moment with people, landlords, offering inducements to tenants to buy their council house, and then they're buying the council house off them, and we're losing council housing to private landlords who then put all the rents up. And you know, there's a huge amount of work that's got to be done to develop a really good understanding of exactly what is going on and the complexity of it all, and then a strategy to develop to meet the needs as we see them now and future needs, of course. So, yeah.
That's very interesting, Daniel. I didn't know about that, but I certainly there was a section on the news about exactly what had been happening in Northamptonshire, but it was happening elsewhere where they had housing officers going round and inspecting the houses of multiple occupancy. And so this is something that's a problem in many more areas than just Northampton, that's for sure.
No, you're right. I think it's an urban area, but I think it's not just an urban area. So what's happening in South Northampton, Daventry and the outer regions of Northampton is that people are not calling places HIMOs anymore. They're calling them Airbnb. Yeah. They are HIMOs, but they're being listed as Airbnb.
And it's also then putting the price up exponentially, and there's no actual private houses for rent in our areas anymore. So there's no alternatives going on. So it's a big problem.
But the issue for us as Scrutiny is how we're going to manage it between us all, because there's clearly a place interest, a people's interest, and certainly from my point of view, a budgetary interest. So it's about how we're going to manage that.
Well, I would have expected that the after the consultation is coming back to people, but there's no reason why it shouldn't be put on the programme for the other two committees as well.
Tracy?
Just to let you know that Place Ovian Scrutiny is having a workshop on the strategy after its meeting next week, also to looking at issues that come under the Place Scrutiny's remit. So that is all scheduled and members are aware of that from that committee. So follow the lines of the workshop that went to People Scrutiny.
Right. So will that briefing be completely different to the briefing that People's had?
I understand from speaking to the officer it will be slightly different because it will relate to Place Overview and Scrutiny.
Okay. Okay, so how shall we take this forward then in terms of us all developing a really good overview which involves people, place and finance?
Well, would finance have the same briefing as well? And then when the results of the consultation come back to each committee, then we as chairs actually bring to this coordinating committee the views and results from each of our committees to that consultation, and the input into the final report.
That sounds good. James?
I was going to suggest, Chair, you may want to consider the scope to do this once collectively rather than across 3 scrutiny committees. I mean, for practical reasons, that it looks likely that if the subsequent scrutiny that was suggested at the people workshop, so the request was that there be some further scrutiny once the outcomes of the public consultation are known, and then that there be an opportunity for pre-decision scrutiny of the full draft strategy, resulting full draft strategy. Just on a practical basis, because of the timings for the public consultation and the decision by cabinet, the dates of the scheduled People's Scrutiny Committee meetings don't fit very well. And in terms of getting the most effective result from the scrutiny sessions anyway, you may be looking at sort of workshop sessions rather than doing the scrutiny at a formal committee meeting. So there is scope in that, for example, to have, as has been suggested, a workshop session that sits under the People's Scrutiny Committee but might be open to members of other scrutiny committees as well. So that would be doing something once involving all of the members of different scrutiny committees, rather than doing it 2 or 3 different times at each of the different scrutiny committees, if you see what I mean.
I do see what you mean, but I'd like to formalise that a bit, because I think that needs to come to each scrutiny group, and it would be daft to do it 3 times. And I understand, you know, that for each different scrutiny group, the officers would tailor the briefing and it would be slightly different. But I think as chairs, we are the ones who need to have an integrated overview. So because finance doesn't stand on its own, place doesn't stand on its own, people can't do anything without place and finance. So I think there is I think that needs to come to the joint committees.
Can I make a suggestion on this? Because the work programme, which we are looking at an example at the moment, is something I imagine we all have on our agenda. Yeah. And probably the last item on the agenda. So we sit down and we go through those things. We look at what we've done, we look at what we're doing, and we look at what we might be doing. And that's where certainly in place committee, we discuss items and things that come up that members put in. I'm worried about this and what about that, or things that we've been told are coming up from the officers as well. And then we put them in our work plan one way or another, and then it sort of works its way through. Now, those work plans are updated at every committee meeting, I understand. And surely if we could have an item where we look through each other's work programs and to see which ones perhaps have got relevance to us. And equally, when we put our items on the work program, we could actually flag up that this may be of interest to another group. I mean, that certainly is going to be in most of the contract some element that crosses all 3 borders, but that doesn't necessarily mean we want to study it in depth, but we ought to keep a watching brief on it. So I think if we flag these things up on our work plans and then sort of spread them across, then we should be able to pick out the ones where we need to work together on. I don't know, would that work, do you think?
I think it does, but I think we're talking about a particular theme at the minute, aren't we? And it's housing. So we've had that down for the coordinating group to think about in terms of how we're going to address that across the.
Sorry, I thought we moved off housing. I apologise.
I suppose I'm concerned. The idea of having a joint one is to how many. Obviously, if everybody came, it would be a very unwieldy number. Or would there be, not as much interest with the other groups, and would they actually attend? If you say this is going to be done, say, under the people overview and scrutiny. Sorry, do excuse me. But other overview and scrutiny members are encouraged to attend. just how many people would actually bother turning up. I just worry.
We could do this as a Zoom type meeting, because I don't think the meetings we're talking about necessarily need to be public meetings. We're trying to sort out what we're going to be studying in the future. So it's something we could do by Zoom, which would make life easier for everybody. But certainly, you know, I fear we're going to end up having 2 or 3 of these a week if we're not careful, and that's going to sort of blow everyone's mind.
But I'm still trying to work out how we're going to tackle the housing consultation and scrutiny when it does actually cross all 3 scrutiny committees. And as I say, we either do it, the workshop comes to each of the separate scrutiny committees, and then we as chairs and vice chairs bring back from our various committees what the issues were, and coordinate them within our small group, or we have one vast workshop that's an extra overview and scrutiny for members of all 3 groups. And it seems to me that's the decision that we've got to take tonight, actually.
I'm going to make a suggestion. Tracy, did you have your hand up?
Yes, Councillor. All I was going to suggest was, if you did do it all together, you might want to consider the format that you did for budget scrutiny. But I think you might have been to say that.
That's exactly what I was just going to say. So when we were doing our budget scrutiny, it worked extremely well, the format. So if I explain it to you, we started off together, and then we went into 3 different breakout groups, and each group had a lead person, and we had a very in-depth discussion about that particular theme, and then we brought it together. And I think it's that bringing things together that I am really interested in, because I want to understand the place bit, the people bit, and the finance bit as a whole. But it worked extremely well with the budget. So I think that might be an idea, Tracy, to see if we can do that. So how it might work would be that we had a presentation giving us an overview, and then we had 3 in-depth breakout rooms looking at a particular theme, and then brought that together. So the people appointed for each breakout room were the ones who did the reporting back, and then we had a kind of general discussion where we reached an understanding of the whole thing. So it did work extremely well, I have to say. Could I suggest that to you?
So this would be an extra over meeting that you're going to have to find a date for, that's not in the normal programme. Is that correct?
It wouldn't necessarily be a different another meeting for you, just for me and Dermot.
Oh, right.
Because if you've already got a feedback,
we've already got it scheduled. Yeah.
Yes. We could expand that to include all of us. Yes, Tracy.
Sorry, Councillor Stone, but Place Scrutiny's also got their workshop scheduled as well, which is directly after the Place Scrutiny Committee next Tuesday. It's all sort of set up with the officers, and the members are ready for that.
Okay. So what's the implication of that then?
Well, can I suggest we've got that on? Let's see how it goes, and see if that makes a good model for other issues like that, because I think that'll work quite well, because we're obviously looking deeply into our side of it, and it's such a large subject that if we extended it, it could end up being a marathon meeting, and I think we can then pluck out what we think is significant about it, and then feed that back to whoever comes next. If that's you, Danielle, you know, this is what we've discussed and what we think, and then feed that into you.
And it doesn't preclude that you're just replicating or what people has already done, but we have asked then after the consultation for it to come back before it is finalised as a full report that then goes to cabinet.
Yeah,
so we want to, so that's the bit that we
That's the bit.
Yeah,
that's the bit that we want to do jointly in the way that I described.
Yeah.
Would that be all
we
right?
could do that.
Yeah.
We could do that.
Yeah. Can we agree that then? I think that would be quite an exciting way of doing it. And I think, you know, I'm very, very happy to be in a position where I'm learning from my colleagues, because you've taken a kind of different perspective to me. James.
And if you're talking about a joint meeting on the housing strategy, and by the sound of it, doing that on Zoom and using the same breakout approach as you did with the budget scrutiny, then that potentially gives you your three breakout groups, because they could be one breakout group looking at the sort of built environment perspective, who would be the place people, one people looking at the softer side of housing, which would be your people scrutiny committee people, and another group looking at the finance side, which would obviously,
and then bringing it together. I think that would be terribly useful.
Can I just ask, how do breakout groups work within a Zoom environment?
Would you like me to explain, Councillor Stone?
Yes, please.
And what happens is, Councillor Banbridge, they'll be usually timed, so everyone works to the same time, and the person who's hosting the Zoom will put you in that breakout room. So you leave the main session, you go into your breakout room, you can receive presentations in there, you can have a discussion. It's just like being in the main room, but it's a sub room. And then when you've got 5 minutes left, you'll get a reminder, and then everyone is brought back. The breakout rooms close at the same time, so you all finish at the same time, and you're all brought back together at the same time. It's quite
fine. That sounds quite good.
It's quite seamless. It works really, really well.
Yeah, sounds good.
I'd be terribly keen to do that.
Yeah.
I think there is a benefit if it's an extra over meeting. There's a benefit to doing it on Zoom, because I think we'll get more buy-in.
Yeah. Yeah.
It would need to be called a task and finish group rather than a formal committee.
Yeah.
Then you're going to meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can we agree that then? That's lovely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Anything else on the agenda? You're on mute, Tracy.
Sorry, and I'm having terrible problems as well. I don't know what's happening.
Yeah, you're disappearing into a
I know.
fog.
I thought the minute I'm going to go.
Looks like Ghostbusters.
It is, isn't it? No, I think that's the last item, Councillor.
Brilliant. Very good meeting. Thank you all very much indeed.
Thank you.
you,
Sorry
Tanya.
Okay.
to hand over the chair to you, and didn't get called out, but
No worries. Your turn next.
been hearing the coughing in the background. And from
Okay.
Rosie.
Yeah, so
Like stereo.
I'm just getting over COVID, and I warn you that it takes a lot longer than you think.
So yeah, so I'm
dear.
advised.
Sorry
Yes,
to hear
we're
that.
we're on day 3 at the moment.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And can I ask Tracy or James or anybody, can you give me a phone number for IT so I can sort my computer out tomorrow?
Yes, of course. I'll email. Oh, I can't email you, can you? When it stopped live, I'll give you the phone number.
Okay. Oh, you
Okay.
can. Yeah, thank you.
I'm going.
Well, I can't